Chapter 18 War in the Fairylands. Oberon and his tree lords were assembled on the boundaries of the Fairylands. They were ready and waiting to fight Maleficent should she return. Oberon's heart was filled with dread at the thought of facing her again, and at the same time filled with joy at seeing his fairies gathered together in the distance, on the lookout for Maleficent. He had lost many friends and soldiers in their last battle with Maleficent. His lost friends would return, of course, but not for many years. Not until they had time enough to grow. Tulip had seen to replanting of his fallen tree lords after the battle at Morningstar. She had put their roots back into the ground and tended to them with care. But now she had an even more important task given to her, one that filled Oberon's heart with worry. He felt he should have seen this coming, a great war between the witches and fairies, but he hoped they would be spared. As he and his army stood guard, waiting for the battle to commence, he put out a silent call to all the gods of nature to help in the battle. He knew the Odd Sisters would not stop after destroying the Fairylands. They would want dominion over the entirety of the many kingdoms now that they had taken their place as queens of the dead. He had tried to reason with Mania and her mother years ago, tried to convince them that sending Lucinda and her sisters into the world would be a mistake, but they hadn't listened. It had been his experience that most did not listen when oracles of another faith spoke their truth. They listened only to their own kind. He often felt he should have refused to take the Odd Sisters in, giving the witches of the Deadwoods no choice other than to raise the children themselves, but he had feared for the children's fates, and decided to take the tiny witches in and arrange a proper home for them. Nanny had seemed like the right fairy to undertake such an untraditional role, but all fell into chaos, grief, and ruin as she suffered one loss after another, until she finally decided to lose herself in the place between. That was when Oberon took away Nanny's memories, took her identity, giving her peace and a chance to redeem herself through Tulip and Circe. And now here they were, both faced with the possibility of having to destroy these witches because of the choices they had made along with their parents. As he looked at Nanny, standing with her sister and the other fairies ready for battle, he felt a deep sorrow for her that he might have to face her foster daughter in strife once again. He felt himself pulled in many directions, his mind drifting from his soldiers to his fairies and to Circe. He wanted to send part of his army to the Deadwoods, but there were so few soldiers left now after their last battle with Maleficent that he felt they were needed here. He could only hope the gods of nature would listen to his call and come to Circe's aid in the Deadwoods, if it wasn't too late already. Oberon watched the sky for Maleficent's bird, Opal. She was keeping a lookout for any sign of Maleficent and the Odd Sisters' other creatures. The fairy godmother, Flora, Merryweather, Fauna, Nanny, and the Blue Fairy, with a legion of other fairies, were in the distance, just beyond the horizon, keeping watch as well. He was so proud seeing all his fairies assembled on the hilltop, standing together side by side, their wands ready to do battle with Maleficent once again. He could see Nanny searching the sky for Opal with her keen eyes, hoping she would bring an early warning of Maleficent's arrival. As brave as his fairies were, he knew they dreaded another confrontation with the Dark Fairy, especially Nanny. He thanked the Fairylands for Opal. Before she came to him with the Odd Sisters' plans, he had thought the poor creature had died along with Maleficent's other birds during the great battle. It was a brave choice, coming to him as she had, making Grimhilda and Lucinda's plan known to him after she escaped Grimhilda's clutches. He knew what it meant for Opal to betray her old mistress, but Opal had watched Maleficent change over her many years. She no longer saw the young girl she used to love within Maleficent before she died, and now that her tormented mistress was finally released from her pain, Opal had turned her loyalties to a witch with a pure heart, Circe. Oberon sighed, remembering how desperate Opal was when she told him her tale. She had survived the battle, but hid among Maleficent's dead ravens and crows to see if she could find her mistress. But what she found was the odd sisters plotting to raise her mistress from the dead, to use her as they had longed to do while she was alive, and she knew she had to stop them. The poor bird had gone through so much while making her way to him, and he hoped she would survive this battle, to share her story with Circe herself. He hoped that they would all survive. Either way, their story would live on in the book of fairy tales, as all their stories had, if readers looked deep enough. Surely the book would contain the story of how the old Queen Grimhilda had captured poor Opal, or how Snow White was finally free of her mother, or how the odd sisters had used old and sinister magic to bring Maleficent back from the dead, or the story of a brave young woman named Tulip who made peace between the Cyclopean giants and the Tree Lords. All their stories were there, written, or waiting to be written, and he wondered what ending Circe would write for herself. And then he saw. His answer was there, silhouetted and falling from the clouds, careering toward the earth. The dark, shadowy dragon beast was plummeting to its death. The odd sisters had brought her back only for her to die another painful death, and he knew without a doubt what a grave mistake he had made in letting the odd sisters live outside the Deadwood's boundaries, and he knew what Circe must have done to save them all.